You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. I'm starting to get pretty good at this investing things, guys. I did what they call buying the dip. I bought the dip over the weekend. I had a feeling gas prices were going to go up, so I filled my tank up Sunday morning, even though I didn't need to fill up just yet, just because I had a bad feeling about the way things were progressing. And it's looking as though I made the right economic decision, which is always a good feeling. It's always a sign of a thriving, well put together economy that we approach filling up our gas tank of our vehicle with the exact same approach that we might try and get ourselves involved with day trading, right? Funny how that works out to much less complaining compared to where we were just 4 years ago. Um, wild time to be out there. And by the way, speaking of buying gas, it's like I'm suffering from climate change in the Myron construction studio right now. It is very warm. I'm going to try my best to hide how hot it is right now, but if I start sounding delirious right around 10:30 Central Time, please know that it's because of the temperature in the room that I'm in right now. I want to start the show off in the personal world. Over the weekend, I was invited to speak at an event, to speak at a Green Party event specifically, third party event. And I went, I spoke for about 20 minutes. I met a handful of candidates who are running in the Wisconsin area as members of the Green Party, one of which was running against Glenn Grothman in Congressional District 6. One of them, David, is running for District 5. You know what? I'm blanking. I don't have it written down in front of me, but David is a regular interactor with this show, which I appreciate the invite very much. Definitely got to know some interesting people. And if you know me, you know that I think that this election period is ripe for the picking. I do think that the Democrats will walk away with a hearty landslide, and then it's going to be on them to actually deliver in a meaningful way. And if you know Democrats the way that I do, your hopes are not up that you might find them, you might actually see them do something that you can get behind once they kind of control the different levers of power again. And that was kind of the point that I went there and wanted to talk to them about. I basically just did an extra segment for them while I was down there. And given the way that this administration has been governing, it really shouldn't be a 50-50 chance about whether or not Democrats are going to win the presidency back, whether or not they can win the Senate. And the reason it is a 50-50 chance is because, there's a certain contingency of the electorate that is just something trans and Mexicans until they die, and that's fine. Who am I to tell you that your single issue is either important or not important? It's definitely not my place to do that. But more importantly, it's that I still don't trust the Democrats to not mess this up, to not take a stance on something that is objectively unpopular, specifically within their party, possibly across both sides of the aisle, in the name of keeping these elections a little bit close. And so in an effort to keep them honest, I kind of pushed the people that were there at the Green Party, the people running, to say, hey, you find yourself in a unique position to be able to tell these people you are not going to be able to get away with status quo as usual. The fact that the Republican Party is uniquely bad, the fact that the MAGA movement is uniquely trash, is not going to give you the cover that you need in order to get all the votes necessary to win the election. You would think Kamala Harris losing to Donald Trump, despite the fact that he didn't have a single idea, might actually have been that notification. It's like, hey, running on January 6th, sending money to Israel, and the fact that Bidenomics is working may in fact have been a stupid idea, but I also don't trust them. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. So I had a very interesting conversation with people in the Oshkosh area affiliated with the Green Party. I'm not necessarily filling out my registration card or anything like that, but it was an interesting experience nevertheless. And I'm available to speak at any of these kind of events that want to have a talk about third parties, about pushing the two-party system to the limits and actually trying to find a way to bring some common sense back to politics. I am on board for that. And thank you again to David, who asked me if I would take part in this event, because I most certainly wouldn't have been there had I not been. So I appreciate that very much. Now, In terms of what the Wisconsin Democrats are doing, and if you're newer to the show, Wisconsin Dems have escaped my ire the entire time that I have done this show. Not because I think they are uniquely better or worse than the national Dems, but because they haven't been in a position to be able to do anything. They have a lot of good policies, but the Republicans in Wisconsin have blocked any effort at any meaningful legislation, um, gaveling out of special sessions, not necessarily pushing any legislation to the forefront that I would argue would garner quite a bit of support and attention, not just amongst Democrats, but amongst independents and even a handful of conservatives within the state. So I've always kind of laid off of Democrats in our state until, of course, they have power. And if they find themselves acting like the Democrats do nationally, well, we're going to have another conversation about it. I mean, for sake of argument, nationally, I should say, House Republicans right now are pushing a bill that would force states to stop acknowledging trans people in schools. The Dems are coming to trans our kids, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we have to vote for MAGA. I realize my life is worse, but we got to make sure they don't trans our kids. That's the attitude nationwide, and that's kind of the same reality that we have been focusing on here in Wisconsin. Now, I had a planned segment about this, but before we get into that, I would like to tie this into what we were mentioning during the local half hour of the show, specifically talking about dreamers, DACA recipients, 5,100 people labeled as dreamers in the state of Wisconsin who, as a result of a bill signed by Governor Evers, are going to have an easier time finding their way into the workforce. Now, there's a reason why this bill was passed, and it's because our workforce has been struggling for a while here in Wisconsin. And as Jerry highlighted in the text during that segment, if we want to expand the workforce in Wisconsin, the state legislature should stop trying to implement policies that alienate the majority of young professionals. And I would have to agree with that. Whether we talk about our teachers making less than they do in neighboring states, whether we talk about the run-amok cost of childcare, whether we talk about the inadequate housing supply that welcomes people in a way that would welcome them to stay in our state, start a family, raise a family. And as a transplant, I can tell you there aren't a lot of great options out there for housing. These are all relevant conversations to be had. We are struggling to fill workforce positions. And whether you talk about the Democrats here in the state of Wisconsin or Donald Trump himself offering amnesty to certain industries who hire undocumented immigrants, forget about dreamers, who hire undocumented immigrants to continue filling positions, work for lower wages, and according to MAGA, take jobs of Americans that clearly weren't interested in taking those jobs to begin with. Inevitably, this is going to be met with a bunch of outward hate. And it's a very frustrating reality as somebody who was sympathetic towards the economic pushback to undocumented immigration. As long as people are willing to come here and work for less than standard wages and be afraid to speak up because it would ultimately result in your deportation, well, that's going to artificially drag down the wages of American workers. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand exactly how we would end up in that position. I think that's just basic deductive reasoning at that point. These are the kind of bills that can get across the finish line when people work together. And that's not even the only one. As I mentioned, we'll have much more to say about this on Wednesday when the Wisconsin GOP inevitably sits down and gavels out of this special session moments after it starts. That is inevitably where that session is going to end up going. At least that's the way it has worked in this state since I've been here. There is a special session tomorrow to eliminate partisan gerrymandering. This is being represented in a way that I think is disingenuous in the media. So allow me to put my own 2 cents in on the matter because I think it's worth diving into. For 15 years, Wisconsin was at the mercy of a fairly partisan gerrymander. The governor and the Republican legislature that took control in 2009 put these maps in place. The Wisconsin Supreme Court that only just now became partisan, but when it was a super Republican Supreme Court, that was actually just them following the law. Don't question it. the very nonpartisan Supreme Court in the 2010s and early 2020s said these maps are okay to stay, so on and so forth. You guys all know the drill at this point. Democrats took back control, wrestled back control after about a decade and a half worth of pushback, back and forth. Took the control of the maps back, changed the way that the maps look, and in my opinion, did a pretty decent job of drawing maps that are going to reflect the will of Wisconsinites around the state. Now, there's going to be a lot of Wisconsin victories, but that's not going to be because of the way the maps are drawn. That's going to be because of how uniquely bad the MAGA movement has been since Trump took over, and the frustration that has been exemplified not just in Wisconsin, but all across this country at voting booths, in the name of replacing these people and getting people in power that mean business. And we're going to talk later, because Democrats are licking their chops at remaining as the milquetoast do-nothings that we all know and love. And I'm here to tell them that that is a big mistake, but more on that in just a moment. Our neighbors to the southwest, Iowa, have a special kind of map drawing process that removes the political element of it. Just basic mathematics, keep it as straightforward and fair as possible. You're not drawing these crazy looking districts that clearly alienate certain elements of the population while overrepresenting other elements of the population. They have it done fairly well. And to be perfectly honest, their state also looks like a giant rectangle, so it's probably a bit easier to do than it will be in Wisconsin, but that's neither here nor there. We can obviously do it if we put our minds to it. The way right-wing media is portraying this is they are saying Democrats just drew the maps, and now they are proposing legislation to prevent the partisan gerrymandering of the maps. And unfortunately, because not enough people pour their life into this, they don't examine this kind of stuff day in and day out. That's the only messaging that they're going to hear on the matter, and then they're going to think accordingly. Allow me to tell you with my full throat that that in no way is an accurate representation of what it is that they are trying to do. What they are trying to do is prevent any kind of re-gerrymandering going forward. Prevent any effort to try and redraw the maps in a way that was not indicative of what the people of Wisconsin wanted. And for those of you, the OGs, the longtime listeners, you remember we talk about how access to childcare, legalization of marijuana. There were a handful of topics in this state that poll at over 60%, and yet they weren't even close to being represented. Hell, we have a 5-2 Wisconsin Supreme Court right now due to several statewide victories across Wisconsin, yet our House of Representatives is 6-2 Republican, because when it's not statewide and the way the maps were drawn, they were drawn in a way that was not indicative of what the people in this state wanted. So I say all that to say there's a special session tomorrow that everybody should be on board with. It prevents the gerrymandering of districts, but I think as the party that is clearly in the minority right now, the party who less and less people feel identifies with the strife and struggle of the average American, that being the MAGA movement, there's going to be a gavel in and gavel out tomorrow. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think we all know that I'm probably right. And I'm interested in your thoughts of the matter as well. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. I'm interested in your thoughts here too. I have a handful of texts here. It looks like they're all over the place here. Ben does say illegal aliens, not dreamers, pedophiles, not minor attracted persons, mothers, not birthing persons, liberals are changing language. Yeah, and Donald Trump's running this country into a dumpster, Ben. I'll take the funny words coming from liberals if it means I have to pay less at the pump and houses get less expensive and they do something about health care. So waka waka, MAGA. Fill in the blank with some piece of some changed terminology that drives you so nuts right now. I'm going to need us to keep our eyes on the prize here. All right. With that, though, I do want to put a pin in that conversation and change to the crux of what I wanted to talk about today, and that is populist frustration. If you guys weren't aware, a fire was started in Ontario, California, 2 actually, at businesses. We have Molotov cocktails being thrown at the inventor of OpenAI. We have a boat tax being removed potentially as a proposed by Nancy Mace of South Carolina while we can't figure out a way to do anything about student loans. And on top of all of this, you have the aftermath of what is going on in Hungary as we speak right now, as after 16 years, the Trump-esque candidate out there in Hungary is being removed from his seat as the prime minister. At the end of the day, all of these stories have something in common, and I would like to talk to you guys about that on the other side of the break. So we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Listen, Wisconsin, we're not warm yet, but melting days and freezing nights mean water is on the move and your sump pump is about to get busy. Water damage is one of the top reasons homeowners file insurance claims, so do yourself a favor and avoid the headache altogether. Test your sump pump today. Call or text Tim Roush and his team. Use that free text line that I've been telling you about. They can help keep your basement dry and protected. Head to timroushplumbing.com for that text line and more info. That's Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company that the Fox Valley depends on. Shout out to everybody following along on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and TikTok Live as well. Thank you for being here with me, guys, as we kind of jump into all these different conversations. And I'd like to highlight Ben came through as well, saying the president doesn't have anything to do with the cost of gas, which is objectively true. Presidents can't set the cost of gas. But when you start an illegal war that directly impacts the cost of gas, then the president does impact the gas. Um, I don't know how much more simply it can be put other than that. Um, Donald Trump sucks at being president. And the only guy that sucks more than that is probably J.D. Vance. I was saving this for the 10 o'clock hour, but like he went to go and talk to the Pope, and then the Pope died. And then he went to go engage in peace talks, and the peace talks collapsed in on themselves. And now we don't even know. And now, as of the start of this show, the blockade was supposed to start 28 minutes ago. I haven't really, obviously, given what I do. I don't know how that's actually going along here. I'm assuming this wasn't a taco moment and that we should only expect the cost of oil and gas to continue going up as these kind of decisions are made. Thank goodness we're not embroiled in some kind of cost of living crisis. And of course, J.D. Vance went to go and campaign with Viktor Orban in Hungary, and then he got a drubbing, almost lost a supermajority in parliament because people are so frustrated with fake populism. And that is what the American right is. I said it during the Biden years, and nothing has been more apparent than what it is right now. They are fake populists. They acknowledge that populism is in right now. They acknowledge that populism is what wins elections, but populism also requires you to push back against the oligarchy. It requires you to push back against billionaires that do not have your interests in mind and are just trying to find ways to make all the money. I haven't really talked about it a lot on this show because I didn't realize a local angle, but now that I'm learning more about it, I found a way to talk about this on a Wisconsin-based local talk radio show. I made a video that went semi-viral. It was seen by over 30,000 people on TikTok about a fire that was started at a Kimberly-Clark warehouse on Ontario, California. In the video, there's one individual walking around with a lighter, flicking the light on and off, saying all you had to do was pay me a living bleeping wage. Here goes your inventory. And then proceeds to allegedly record himself setting fires all over the warehouse. The next day, or 2 days later, I should say, another fire was started by a disgruntled mall employee, also in Ontario, California. A Molotov cocktail was thrown at Sam Altman's house, Sam Altman being the creator of OpenAI. And as I just mentioned, Viktor Orban, running as one of those fake populists, they're transing your kids and aren't immigrants scary, ended up losing his election in an absolute beatdown over the weekend, because in real countries, election days happen over the weekend. All of these stories happening in a silo don't seem like they matter that much. But when you view them all through the prism of people struggling to get by in America today, well, that's an entirely different conversation, right? As I mentioned in the last segment, there is a conversation coming from right-wingers about making sure teachers can't address the trans issue anymore, while doing nothing about the cost of living. You have a president who shows up and says, actually, there's nothing the government can do about the cost of living. You're on your own, losers. I'm sorry the corporate greed is having such a negative impact on so many people. And much to my chagrin, a quote fingers opposition party that, while they were doing infinitely better than whatever the hell this movement is, really weren't taking the problem seriously enough in a way that was going to convince people that they were fighting against a regime of oligarchs that clearly is trying to extract as much wealth as possible out of us here. I mean, hell, have you guys not seen? I'm going to have a couple of clips from Fox News here, some audio from Fox News. If you guys haven't seen the conversation, we are now talking. You know what? I won't even frame it. I'm just going to play it for you. This is an actual conversation being had on Fox News about birth rates in this country and what we're going to do to replace the workforce. And listen to the population of people that they are frustrated with when they say that birth rates are declining. They're declining. You're going to think that this is fake or satire or AI, and I promise you, this is from Fox Business Sunday.
We still have 3.6 million births a year, but the problem is teens and young adults. From ages 15 to 19, the fertility rate is down 7%, and it's down 70% over the last 2 decades, meaning we're telling people that are young not to have babies, to wait till they're in a more stable life situation, till they're more financially secure. Maybe they haven't found the right partner.
Yes, MAGA, you're supposed to wait until you're fiscally responsible in order to have a kid. You know, I told this story about a year and a half ago and I took a ton of hate, but now that the president is making fun of the Pope with impunity, I feel like I'm allowed to talk about this now and not worry about any kind of negative outcomes, which is good news for me. One of the first jobs I ever had, I was working in the back warehouse of a department store, now defunct department store called Value City. The person who was working back there with me, as Anna just puts 15 to 19 with a bunch of question marks and exclamation points, my thoughts exactly. The individual I worked in the warehouse with was in his mid 40s when I was 17 years old. Very bitter, very dejected, really just didn't take life seriously in any way, didn't see an out, would show up to work drunk all the time. But I had a pretty good relationship with him. Management had a very different attitude of him, of course. He would tell me stories about a family member of his who ran his business that he did not want to be associated with. And he would say to me that the owner of this business would look at his employees, and when he found out that one of those employees had got his girlfriend or wife pregnant, that he would start wringing his hands together and get excited. And he would look at this person who was working at the warehouse at the time and say, "See that person over there? I got him for life now. He's going to need to find a way to support that child, so he's never going to put up a fuss at work. He's not going to do anything that would result in him getting fired. He's not going to push back against anything I do in any kind of meaningful way because that kid is coming." And I sat there, and while I believe that a lot of voters are pro-life because they actually believe the stuff they say, I believe a lot of people in business are pro-life because once you have a kid, other options start to become less available to you. And they said as much on Fox News right here, looking for ways to supplement the workforce at certain jobs that are viewed less desirable, because once you have that kid, guys, I'm going to be real with you. This show would suck if I were a family man. If I end up getting married and having a kid, be like, oh, get ready for bed and have a lot more guests and be a lot less fiery. Not because I care less, not because I'm not putting any time into the show, but as I oftentimes wonder, there are days when after I eat and finish up all my extracurricular stuff, whether it's going to events, doing my side hustles, whatever the situation is, I am gone from 6 in the morning until after 6 at night. And so my options are tell whoever the woman is in my life that she has to give up on everything she's doing and raise the kid, or the kid's going to be a latchkey kid, in which case, why did you even bother having the kids to begin with? And those are kind of the two options that are presented. And Fox News is mad that you dumb cretins aren't having kids at an irresponsible time during a cost of living crisis. Because how are these oligarchs going to be able to keep their menial positions filled if you're not popping kids out without worrying about the aftermath of it? Wasn't always the case. It wasn't always an economic death sentence to have a child when you were not ready. In 2026, good freaking luck. And then out of the same corner of the mouths, they will ask you, why is there a birthing emergency? Why can't we convince people to have more children? Why are millennials? Why am I the norm for single 30-something people that I would argue really don't have that much wrong with them, not interested in going the child route? It's because it is so far beyond the pale to ask people to engage in childbirth, even at a responsible age, let alone an irresponsible age, because of the cost of living crisis. And by the way, wasn't the whole point of like abstinence training and sexual education, wasn't that supposed to talk young people into not having kids? Premarital sex is bad. We shouldn't be upset that 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and 17-year-olds are not having children. That should realistically be the desired outcome. I'm confused. I'm confused about where we lost our trajectory there. But so I say all of that to say, the childbirthing rate is just one casualty of the ignoring of populist energy, populist attitudes. And that is both right wing and left wing. Liberals handled it a different way. They just kneecap the Bernie movement so that it never takes off. Right wing populism takes a different approach. Their right wing, quote fingers here, populist, got into a position of power, i.e., Donald Trump. And then he proceeds to just do the same stuff anyway and hopes that enough members in the cult pretend like he is making life empirically better for so many people, despite all of the evidence to the contrary of that statement. And unfortunately, as of 16 months into the presidency so far, it does look like that has been an effective strategy, at least for the diehards. But so you see these movements happening. And by the way, 30,000 views on my video of the fire at the warehouse in Ontario, California. Very few people expressing sadness for the company that was impacted by it. You saw some people saying that they were upset because that dude's actions probably just cost 20 people their jobs, which is an accurate statement. But there were about 90% of the comments that were objectively gleeful at what was going on, in saying if more people did it, then insurance companies would stop insuring places like this in order to stop, and then it would only become more of a fiscal issue for these companies. Very, very similar reaction to the aftermath after the alleged Luigi Mangione operation in December of 2024. The fact that people can watch a fire set an entire building ablaze, and again, no lives were lost. It is just a matter of insurance companies and a loss of inventory, mostly toilet paper. The fact that people can look at something like that and cheer it, I'm not going to condemn them for doing it. I understand the frustration. You turn around and you look at your elected leaders talking about whether or not Donald Trump should be able to crap talk the Pope or not. And you find yourself trying to figure out, I'm only eating 5, maybe 6 days a week because of what's going on at grocery stores. Then you look at what's going on in New York, and Zohran Mamdani, as one of the only people that's actually willing to address the cost of grocery prices by creating state-run grocery stores, as is vilified as the only person that has any objective idea on how to address things. Tom Tiffany is running for governor in the state of Wisconsin right now. Glenn Grothman is running for his seat in Congressional District 6 right now. Both of these individuals voted to cut taxes for billionaires, and have not vocalized any kind of frustration towards an illegal war taking place in the Middle East, started unilaterally by President Donald Trump. They're going to have a very hard time running against it. But if Democrats, A, don't show up with a platform that says they're going to do something about it, and B, then don't follow through even if they say the right words, well, we're going to have a pretty big issue on our hands, because the frustration and the violence, while I am not calling for anybody to be violent or to burn any buildings down, especially not on FCC airwaves or on any of the lives that I am doing right now, I would never advocate for that kind of activity. It's going to become more prevalent because, as I stated in my video, the people that are struggling to get by know that it is not, it does not have to be that way. We, especially those of us in first world countries, anybody struggling to get by, not paying for health care, struggling with basic necessities while working 40 hours plus a week, knows that it's not a matter of them not generating value. It's not a matter of them not having a job. It's a matter of there being jobs that have to be filled, right? Because people always say, well, then go get a better job if you're upset with the wages. Somebody has to do the job, right? So in other words, we're saying that someone has to be paid so little that they can't afford a roof over their head or food 7 days a week. And that the American dream is making sure that you put yourself in a position to not be one of those people. That's the way that we are portraying this conversation right now, and pretending that this is normal, that it's the fault of the people, that being turned down for healthcare costs that in any other country would be addressed, that is the fault of the people and not the fault of a broken system. By the way, ProPublica has a fascinating expose about United Healthcare, who you may be familiar with. That's the Luigi story again, trying to find a shady way to make sure that they can prevent people from getting access to therapy as often as they would like to, because apparently their record-setting profits were not taking them far enough, and they see an opportunity to make even more record-setting profits as time goes on. I'm sure MAGA, once they're done with transgender people and Mexicans, will eventually find time to address that. But until then, waka waka, MAGA. Looks like your party might be a giant pile of crap. You see the trajectory that we are on. And on top of all of this, J.D. Vance heads over to Hungary to campaign with Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban being the Trump metaphor in Hungary, essentially the same guy talking about, can you believe these Africans and Muslims are taking your jobs? It's definitely not the 6 corporations that control everything worldwide making your life worse. It's all of these people. And that worked. For 16 years, that worked. And right now, Hungary's parliament is 5 seats away from a supermajority for the opposition party because people finally woke up and decided to say that they were done with whatever the hell that individual was trying to put to impress upon his constituents. It's a shame it took 16 years of a gradually slipping infrastructure in order for people to wake up to it. Hopefully, Americans are able to wake up to it a little bit quicker. But there is a cause for concern for that as well. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party won in 2024 in the British elections by an enormous landslide victory. I would argue that we are on pace for that kind of victory here in America for the Democratic Party because people objectively, it's not going to be that Democrats are good. It's going to be that people are watching the Republican Party and being like, oh, well, obviously not. Let's see what the Democrats have in store. Here's the thing. The Labour Party won with an enormous landslide in Britain, and they proceeded to do the Joe Biden thing, what Kamala Harris would inevitably do, what Gavin Newsom would inevitably do. And they barely tried to govern after winning by landslide victories, thinking that these massive margins were their own mandate, as the MAGA voters said in 2024, their own mandates to legislate based on identity and not do anything about working class issues and affordability and address it in a meaningful way. They are by far, and there's a lot more than 2 parties in Britain, so, I mean, this doesn't necessarily go apples to apples with Democrats, but they are by far the most unpopular government in history right now, in the history of Britain, since Britain has been polling this kind of stuff. That is a preview of what will happen if centrist blue MAGA liberals take over the White House and Congress in 2026, 2028, and beyond, and govern in the way that I think Kamala Harris inevitably would have governed in 2024. So you're seeing this populist energy foment around the entire planet, whether it's in Ontario, California, whether it's in Hungary, whether it's fill in the blank, whether it's in Ireland, where they are protesting like maniacs right now about their government's involvement in what Israel is doing to the people in Lebanon and Palestine right now. You're seeing it percolate through all these different countries, and you're watching the elites and elected politicians find ways to keep us angry at each other. And unfortunately for some people in my text line, that does work as you continue complaining about trans people and immigrants. You can tell they are grasping at straws. You can tell they're trying to figure out a way to placate the people who objectively know what's happening is broken. I will beat this dead horse until it is a pile of nothing on the ground. I was ahead of the affordability curve when you met me. In 2022, we talked about the cost of living and record profits, and Democrats said anybody talking like me was a conspiracy theorist. Now you can't shake a stick at anybody who isn't talking about the oligarchy, cost of living, and the affordability crisis here in America. That is not a coincidence. I found 4 examples that highlights an objectively shared reality for people all around the planet, as they too tried to blame immigrants, and they too tried to blame austerity and entitlements, when in reality, the same handful of companies jerking us around are jerking everybody around the world around, and we're trying to find out if the population of the planet is educated enough to figure out if it's billionaires screwing them over, or if they want to blame whatever closest person to them with brown skin is and identify what their ethnicity is and say it's that group's fault. That is what we are dealing with in America today, and that is what is going on around the world. I have a ton of texts piling up here. I don't know how many of them actually have to do with what I'm saying. I've got comments coming from everywhere. I'm going to go to break, and I'm going to try and parse through some of these comments and find some of the relevant ones for the purposes of this chat. And I welcome you guys as well. 920 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. People are angry, and you notice I saw the fire story, the warehouse fire in Ontario, California. I saw that on CNN this morning. I didn't watch a ton of news over the weekend. I was all over the place. But I will say, I have seen very limited coverage of that fire and the frustration with it and why the person was talking about it. And much like the media went to bury Luigi after they realized people were not particularly upset with the actions he engaged in, I can't help but notice the parallels with this story as well. They know what's happening. I know what's happening. And now that hopefully a handful of you can kind of understand it as well. We'll read these comments and put a bow on this conversation on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. I'm glad the people on the YouTube chat are self-sustaining because you guys go a mile a minute and it's hard for me to keep up with you guys, but I do appreciate that very much. I know Clean and Sober Nation, I haven't talked about the Pope situation. We'll maybe jump into that a little bit in the 10 o'clock hour. I mean, it's to me, like, that is where I have evolved discussing Trump from the first Trump administration to the second. Not that I had my own show, but just my mentality towards it. I think I have the ability to speculate and figure out when he is trying to get us to not talk about his obvious failings. They weren't as clear during the first administration, although the economy still was bad, just wasn't as bad as it was now. The drone strikes were happening, so on and so forth. But so I saw what he said. I heard what he said. He's a jackass, obviously, but I really don't know how much more I can add to it beyond that. But we'll maybe jump into it a little bit in the 10 o'clock hour there. Justin says in the Tech Radar has an article explaining 29% of workers, 44% of Gen Z are sabotaging their employers' AI rollouts by feeding the company data into public models or flat refusing to use AI in their jobs. Not long after Anthropic said half of all entry-level white-collar jobs will be eradicated by AI. If you're not making enough money in your white-collar job, you may be very skilled at it. Now you'll just make no money and will have to seriously shift. No, exactly. And I said as much at the Green Party event that I was at, Justin. And I've said it on the show here before as well. It shows how broken we are. And I don't mean that as an insult, but that a life-changing technology is beginning to be developed. It's still very far away, but there's a lot of jobs that could go away that most people do not want to do. And instead of that being met with excitement, it is being met with frustration because we know damn well that the elected leaders that we have chosen to take us forward in the country here absolutely do not have a game plan for when people inevitably start losing their jobs. They can bank on the Republicans going out there and saying, well, why didn't you diversify your skills? Learn to code, blah, 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 blah. And you can have liberals saying, well, we've put together a workforce that's going to examine these job losses over the course of the next 5 to 7 years and determine what the best route forward would be for so many people. And those are the two parties that you're going to have to choose from. And so people are objectively just angry with AI now. And it's interesting because I can see a version of myself in college and in my early 20s being like, why are all these people so against the invention of this new step forward in technology? Why aren't people embracing what this is? It feels so backwards. Other nations are going to embrace this. We may as well start to do it. Here's the difference between us and other nations. Other nations tax their billionaires. Other nations have social safety nets that are actually meaningful. We don't have 30% of the population whining and moaning that children that are on SNAP benefits have access to chocolate chip cookies, while Elon Musk gets another $3 billion tax cut for a Nazi salute, or for whatever reason he gets it. I'm not sure anymore. That's why these people are actively sabotaging it, and I'm not surprised by that whatsoever. They don't see a path forward where it makes sense, as housing is too expensive and jobs aren't paying enough, and corporations everywhere are trying to find ways to replace them, and then are not turning around and lowering their prices. Not to say that those people would even be able to afford anything because they'd be making no money, but they're not even lowering their prices. We've been told for decades, people have been pushing for the $12 an hour minimum wage since 2011. And now you see states, all helmed by Democrats, of course, standing up and beating their chests saying, look at us and our $15 an hour minimum wage. Yeah, in 2026, about 10 years too late. Time to start looking at something in the 20s here if we're going to expect it to make any sense going forward. I am not advocating for somebody to go and throw a Molotov cocktail at one of the inventors of AI. I recognize that that is not only a crime for them, but it would be a crime for me to be doing so as well. But I'm also saying that people shouldn't be surprised when this kind of stuff happens, when these people go on TV and are actively bragging about the stuff that they're going to do, how they're going to make your life worse, and you were already struggling to get by to begin with. There's a reason why the levels of frustration are so readily apparent, and it has nothing to do. I hate to break it to you, MAGA. Hold on to something. If you're driving, maybe hold on to that thing that you hold on to when you take turns. It has nothing to do with transgender athletes. Your struggles have nothing to do with transgender athletes. Your struggles have nothing to do with the fact that Mexicans are in America. Your struggles are almost entirely born from a greedy subsect of individuals that barely make up 0.1% of our population. And we are continuing to allow them to fleece us and, more specifically, distract you with transgender bills in the name of making sure that nothing gets objectively filled. And then they know the Democrats will show up and will undo 70% of the nonsense that your orange dad president has engaged in the last 15 months and inevitably for the next 2.5 years. But we'll never even get it back to the crap that was going on during the Biden years, let alone objectively making it better for us. With that, we're going to stick a pin in the conversation there. When we come back, we're obviously jumping into the big story of the day. Maybe a little Pope talk, but it's mostly going to be focused on Iran conversations, blockades, and how a blockade is only going to make this worse for us. In terms of cost of living, there's only one way out of this, and it's the same way out that was available before the war started: diplomacy. Download the WHBY app. Check me out on YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok as well. Just subscribe to the Ben Cominos page. Always does me a world of help when you do that, and we'll jump into it on the other side of the news, outside the box. All right, we're back outside the box. Ben Comino's WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company that the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we spent the first half of the show talking about a special session in Wisconsin addressing partisan gerrymandering, as well as a bill signed by Governor Evers to allow for dreamers to enter the workforce. 5,100 people more easily enter the workforce, I should say. 5,100 people going to be benefiting from that piece of legislation there. And then we pivoted into a more broad conversation about populist unrest. And I did want to hit Jacqueline out in Kakana because I was inundated with a bunch of messages. And what's fun and also a bit distracting is sometimes you guys send me messages about literally nothing that I'm talking about. And so I don't mean to ignore the ones that are relevant to what the conversation that we're having, but I'm trying my best here, as I've been saying, as we have all these new means to be able to watch the show here. Subscribe on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook, please. Jacqueline out in Kakana says, and do we want Kamala Harris to recycle her White House bid? As she quotes before the cameras, thinking about running again, the status quo is not working. Oh, well, what's that you say? Put your money where your mouth is. I'm sick of falling down the rabbit hole of ambiguous promises. We need a third party to metaphorically knock the duopolies' heads together. I will be happy to say something nice about the presidency if and when anything of value happens. And DSL kind of takes a similar approach, but saying it differently. Asking, when you say tax the rich, does this also include a tax break or no taxes for the middle class? If I'm not getting a tax break, why would I care if they tax the rich more just so they have more money to squander? They're all frauds. More money won't fix a broken system. And that is a very fair question to ask. And it's something that we talk about regularly on this show. It's a matter of Democrats lost the election in 24 because they were very quick to rally the troops to encourage people to ship $115 billion off to Ukraine and Israel while allowing homelessness to continue to increase. They couldn't find a way to continue the child tax credit, thus thrusting 50% of the child's children that were struggling with a hunger problem back into hunger. As I stated when that happened, we are the only country on the planet that can introduce a tax credit and then say, hey, that tax credit removed 50% of children from hunger. And instead of looking at that and being like, well, if we doubled it, I bet we could make it 100% of children. No, we tried to figure out a way to remove the child tax credit in the name of being able to funnel more money to Ukraine and Israel. And sure enough, the Democrats were able to figure out how to pull that off. Kudos to them. Similar idea in the Trump administration now, although you're hearing MAGA be much less vocal about it. But shipping $40 billion to Argentina, the tens of billions of dollars that we've already spent on this war as it stands today that nobody was asking for, and the almost doubling of the Defense Department's budget brought about by the Republican Party here, all in the name of furthering forever wars and funding a military-industrial complex that will not make your life any better. Meanwhile, study after study after study after study after study after study continues showing the reality that we could save anywhere between $450 and $650 billion if we switch to Medicare for all compared to the way that we are doing it here. All while our elected leaders tell us that that's a pipe dream or that it will inflate taxes and inflate our costs. Meanwhile, Mexico, who has about 1/17 the GDP that America does, instituted Medicare for all. And not only did they institute it, starting in 2 days, everyone over the age of 85 is automatically going to get it, and start at January 1 of next year, everybody in Mexico is going to have access to universal health care. So remember that the next time that they try and convince you that we are not in the capacity to be able to address the issue here. It's why Democrats hate Claudia Sheinbaum as much as they do, because she highlights with regularity exactly how ineffectual blue MAGA really is. And of course, regular MAGA is just, I'd have to dig a hole to get into the level that MAGA has been operating with since January 20th, 2025, in terms of addressing affordability or any of the other issues. As Sabrina Nunes just says 100% on my TikTok feed here. Exactly. This is why they don't like that woman. It's because they highlight that Democrats actually could be an opposition party. They could be a progressive issue. And I'm right there with DSL. If you want to tax Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos more just to be able to make the defense budget $2 trillion, go to hell. Let Jeff and Elon keep their money. It's a matter of actually instituting the policies that will address the needs that we have. Build homes, do childcare, do elder care, do all of these things and fund it by taxing the people that are on pace to become trillionaires before the end of the decade as we clap like trained seals as if that's some kind of achievement and not just a blatant manipulation of the way that this economy is supposed to work. And Anna says ranked choice voting is our best chance, and yet it's the one thing Democrats and Republicans will work together to kill. Well, exactly. Because they'd hate actual real competition. They'd hate to have to actually compete. As I've highlighted before, I'm a firm believer. I'm not saying life would be better or worse because the guy's kind of nuts the further he gets allowed into the spotlight. There's a very high chance that we'd be dealing with President RFK if we lived in a country that allowed ranked choice voting. Because I think a lot of people, both Democratic and Republican, would have voted for him if they knew that once he didn't get enough votes, their votes could be applied to the party that they still affiliate with while trying to throw some sand into the gears of the duopoly. I'm right there with you, Anna, and it seems pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned. Jim says, speaking of wasting war money, what do you think if Trump actually giving Russia more money to help Iran kill Americans and to target our Middle East bases? Is that a thing that happened, or are you talking about how their oil prices have gone up as a result of this war, so they're making more money as kind of like a secondary outcome? I mean, at the end of the day, and you're not going to like this answer, Jim, but I don't view any of these countries as our enemy, and I think the fact that we limit their capacity to make money and surround them with military bases is the exact reason they hate us and why we're in a state of never-ending war and conflict around the world. But at the same time, I'm not so confused that I think Russia, or specifically Vladimir Putin, has our best interests in mind or has any interest in trying to improve the lives of Americans everywhere with the decisions that he makes. I don't buy into that for a second. But it seems to be where these conversations always boil down to is, unlike some people that end up on this show from time to time, I am not objectively afraid of Russia having a nuke or Iran gaining a nuke, because what that means is we have to deal with them diplomatically. I read a post apropos of nothing online that has been living rent-free in my head all weekend. And it's not by anybody famous or anything like that. It's just a random person putting their thoughts out into the ether. And it hit home with me in ways, because I dunk on America and our institutions quite a bit, while at the same time acknowledging that there's a lot to like about this country, at least in terms of the life that I have relative to what other people have. But I'm going to read this to you guys, and this just kind of sums up my foreign policy in a nutshell. I'm not going to expound upon it much beyond reading it. I'm just going to allow you guys to infer what I mean so I can get back into news discourse here. My Roman Empire is the realization that my life is a lottery win. Somewhere in Sudan or Palestine, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, or Congo, there is a boy smarter than me. He's more disciplined, more resilient, and holds more potential in a single finger than I do in my entire career. The only difference, I am sitting in a train and he is sitting in the rubble of his dreams. My bad days are his wildest dreams. My burnout is a luxury he can't afford because his only job is staying alive. It's geographical luck, and it's a haunting injustice that we all refuse to acknowledge and look away. And if you can grasp what I just read to you and not get angry, but truly internalize what I just read to you, you'd understand why I'm anti-conflict and anti-military industrial complex, because I oftentimes have to try and reconcile with that as well. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I can talk to you guys about self-fulfillment and the top part of the pyramid, right? Because I live in America and I have the luxury of being able to talk to you guys about that kind of stuff, because the basics of food and shelter, while not available to everybody in this country, we have food banks. We have an abundance. We throw away food, right? We have record numbers of apartments and homes sitting vacant right now because it's more cost effective for the massive companies that own these buildings to let them sit vacant and charge astronomical prices while we have a homeless problem. It's not a matter of not having access to the materials, resources, and different other economic factors to bring happiness, at the very least, to everyone in America, if not places all over. It's that we've chosen to create this system to almost create a catch-22 and force people into a cyclical, a treadmill that they just find no way to get off of. Whether you find yourself ensnared in crippling student loan debts, whether you had the audacity to get sick and then find yourself in a bill that you can't seem to find your way out of, whether you chose to bite the bullet and buy a home in this market the last 5 years and you find yourself slowly working backwards, not knowing how you're going to make ends meet in 3 years. Those are all very real situations that people experience every single day in this nation, and it's all brought about by choice. It's brought about by a two-party system that is allowing us to argue about transgender athletes instead of the cost of living, that allows us to argue about what the right number of Mexicans is to be included in our workforce, than it is to talk about what jobs are actually paying us to create the revenue that they seem to get all the time. This is why you see young people turning to socialism and communism. You know, when you really look at what capitalism is defined, the profit that CEOs and managers and higher ups at these multinational companies find themselves making while their constituents find themselves not going to doctor's visits 3 years in a row. The profits that they are deriving are the excess wealth created by the individuals who are doing jobs that some people in this country have been brainwashed into saying don't deserve to make a living wage. Is pouring coffee a difficult job? No. Does pouring coffee generate $9 billion in revenue for Starbucks in a year? Yes. And therefore, a person working at Starbucks shouldn't be wondering how they're going to eat later today, given the amount of revenue and profit that they are generating in society. Not a bold statement that I'm making here, and yet nevertheless, a handful of you will allow yourselves to be propagandized into villainize the working class, as opposed to villainizing less than 1,000 people that have objectively made life worse around the country. One TikTok messenger says they are squeezing every last penny out of the American people whilst our politicians allow them to. Exactly. Welcome to the program. You'll love it here. It's kind of the general sentiment that I talk with a regular basement on the show. And Jarmani on the YouTube line says, love that you went with pouring coffee. Well, because that's oftentimes the villainized occupation, right? People pouring coffee are viewed as lazy and not interested in getting a real job. And the people drinking coffee are villainized and told the reason they can't afford a home or to pay their rent is because they drink a coffee. And it's a pretty simple thing to highlight that's obviously not the case, and that's a simpleton's attitude. But unfortunately, in America, simpleton is right around median. Or the median American is right around simpleton as far as I'm concerned. And that's by design as well. It's why we're underfunding schools. It's why we're making it more difficult to get an education. I could go on, but this is in no way what I intended to talk about this hour. But you know how easy it is to distract me with populist messaging there. You know, I went to that Green Party event on Saturday and I was talking, and like I said, I basically just did a segment of Outside the Box, and they asked me while I was there, I was like, would you consider becoming a Green Party member and running? I'm like, no, let's not go crazy here. This is what I'm here to do. I put the ideas out into the ether. It's on everybody else to enact them and realizing that they're what they're falling for. Hamsters on a wheel, as Jacqueline says. That's all we are. I'll tell you what. Let's reset the conversation here. The Strait of Hormuz is currently sitting blocked. If you have not heard the Fox News clips from Sunday morning's show that came out where the President of the United States, who either is or is not suffering from dementia right now, it's kind of hard to tell, although based on the sound bites that I will be playing for you in about 5 minutes, I think it will become a bit easier for some of you to tell what the answers to that question is. We're going to dive into how he talked about the cost of living, tankers going through the Gulf of Mexico, and so much more. And just because so many of you guys are asking me about it in the text line, we'll jump a little bit into the Pope slander as well, because it is remarkable that somebody, specifically within the Republican Party, felt that he is safe enough to start crap talking the Pope, the woke Pope, the wope, if you will, because he had the audacity to essentially paraphrase the Bible. We'll jump into that on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. I love Matt's comments in here on YouTube. In the same minute, I both won the lottery. Wait, Both, I won the lottery to be born into this system, and this system is destroying our lives. We're so lucky. It sucks. And I think that sums it up perfectly. It's kind of like, I was big into Game of Thrones. I promise I will get to what I've been teasing for the last 40 minutes. I promise, but you guys are great. I was a big Game of Thrones guy, and you would watch Game of Thrones. I used to say you could tell what George R.R. Martin was trying to say in terms of subtext, like going beyond what the actual story's about. And King's Landing was very obviously a metaphor for America, because when you went anywhere that wasn't King's Landing, it was objectively crap, and everybody was living in squalor. Everyone, of course, wasn't white. There was a number of factors going on anywhere outside of King's Landing. But then they would show you King's Landing, and there were like 37 people that had really good lives in King's Landing, and everybody else was just trying to get by. You know, everyone was like, boy, I hope our 13-year-old boy king doesn't accidentally see me today and make me drink like a stupid amount of wine or threaten to set me on fire because I didn't tell a funny joke. And like, very clearly I could tell what he was going for, because you definitely didn't want to live outside of King's Landing. Like, I saw what was going on there. But then in King's Landing, it was like really not better. And like, everyone be walking around talking about how proud they were to be from King's Landing, how happy they were. And I was like, oh, I get what you're going for here. It's pretty heavy-handed, and something tells me a large percentage of the population that just swoop right over their head. But that's just me, of course. All right. On to what I wanted to talk about today. This is a long time coming here. Yeah, and I see Zach saying, Friday after your show, I heard terrible news. Harris mentioned she's leaning towards a presidential run in 2028. I heard that as well, but as I keep trying to remind people, when the primary started for the New York mayoralship, Zohran Mamdani was polling at 1%, and then he won the election. You know why he won the election? Because he actually ran on your tax dollars should be working for you. And as Dice Shaking Lamar pointed out, he doesn't want to increase taxes on billionaires if it just means it's more money for them to squander. What Mamdani's doing is filling potholes. He's paying people that don't have jobs to show up the day after a massive snowstorm and start shoveling the sidewalks and the roads, so that less than 24 hours after 2 feet of snowfall, everything is operational again. Taking tax dollars and making them work in a way that there is an empirical benefit from the people that chipped in, and the people that are struggling to get by benefit from those dollars as well. Objectively, everybody should be singing his praises, but he's a Muslim, so we don't do that. Now, with that, as we've been kind of highlighting all day, Donald Trump has been distracting from his botched war in Iran by picking a fight with the Pope, the woke Pope, the wope, if you will. He doesn't want, he is not thrilled with the wope, because he addresses, he being the Pope, of course, that crime is a matter of circumstance, and trying to rule with an iron fist is something authoritarians do, and that's not what he believes is the appropriate way to handle that. You know, like a certain savior that everybody celebrated 8 days ago without an ounce of irony in their in the way that they carried themselves. You hear the things that he's saying about the Pope, and politically, I have no idea what he's thinking. It's one of the few times I've actually seen pushback against it. Hell, I even posted a picture on my Facebook page of Obama depicted as Jesus, just to elicit rage and reaction from people. And I didn't even I barely got any negative feedback from it at all, because people understand exactly how stupid the president is. I did it to ironically push back against what he does. And everyone always chimes in on my posts. You're a moron. You don't get it. This guy sucks. Look at him. Nothing negative, because they realize exactly how bad 8 days after Easter, on the same day as Greek Orthodox Easter, Greeks we're celebrating Easter yesterday. I kind of forgot it was Easter. I realized I talked about it on Friday, and then I woke up this morning and saw a bunch of texts from my family group chat about Easter. I was like, oh, son of a gun. I forgot that was happening. But nevertheless, that's when the president decided to do this. And there's actually a clip of it where he goes on to say, and he's not a fan of the Pope, and I apologize, but it was one of those like front lawn interviews where there's like the casual humming of an airplane behind him. So it's going to be a little difficult to process, but I think you should be able to tell what's happening here. Listen to this comment when he's called out on it.
And they're going to go back filled up with oil. Okay?
Why did you attack Pope Leo on Truth Social?
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. He hit us. Think of it. He's worried about fear. What about the fear when the ministers and the priests and all of those great people that were arrested during COVID, and in many cases they're outside 10 feet apart, and they were arrested. So we don't like it. We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon so they can blow up the world. I'm not a fan of Pope Leo.
Now, notice how you have to almost caricaturize what Iran is to say they want to blow up the world and that's why they want to nuke, because the objective reality of it is fairly simple. We have, over the course of the last 40 plus years, we being America, of course, I had nothing to do with it. Over the course of the last 40 years, we have bombed over 40 different countries. Any speculation as to how many of those countries had access to nuclear weapons? Okay, good. You all got the right answer. That's why other countries want nukes, is because we have been operating with impunity, bombing quite a few nations out there, whether justifiably or unjustifiably so. I'd argue there's no reason for civilian casualties ever. And the more I learn about most armed conflicts, the more I've realized take a couple of deep breaths and step backwards was probably the right answer to whatever kind of back and forth ended up erupting. That's the way that he characterized the Pope. That's the way that he characterized the conflict with Iran. And that's the way that he characterized crime. Again, because he has to do whatever he can to keep the cult talking about criminals, not from the perspective of a lack of access to resources, not from a perspective of Aladdin stole bread because he was hungry, not because he was a criminal. Got to steal to eat, got to eat to live. That's how we get along. I don't remember the tone of the song, but I remember the lyrics of the song. It is a simple reality facing so many Americans today. But he can't have that conversation. So instead, he'd rather vilify the Pope in the name of trying to drive a point home because he is struggling so much. I didn't pull the audio, but Fox News, Brian Kilmeade and his guests are there speculating about making an age requirement for people to be able to listen to certain podcasts, because podcasts everywhere, the podcasts that were carrying water for Donald Trump in 2024 are saying that this is a stupid war and that we were probably brought into it as a result of our allies and not as a result of any kind of strategic involvement coming from America in general. Now Fox News wants to ban people's participation on that front. We're watching this president come apart at the seams. And if that's not price enough, let's listen to his conversation on Fox News Sunday with Maria Bartiromo, or however you say her name. Let's listen to his conversation that he had here. Because if Joe Biden were asked a question about the cost of gas back in 2022 when it shot up during the Ukrainian war, and he answered like this, there would rightfully so, A, be highlights toward his dementia, and B, be calls for him to be removed from office. I am aware that he is trying to joke here. I'm not accusing him of being confused or anything like that. Does this seem like the time or the place to answer a question like this in the way that he did surrounding tankers coming through the Gulf of Mexico and what that's going to do for the price of oil?
President, because you referred to a post that hundreds of super tankers are headed to the Gulf of America to buy oil and gas from the U.S. What can you tell us about that, sir?
Well, I can tell you that it used to be called the Gulf of Mexico. That's what I can tell you. Now it's called the Gulf of America because of me. One of my little things that I did, one of my little sidelines. and it's a great honor. People are so happy. You go to Louisiana, you go to Florida, you go to these states, Texas. They're so honored by it. I used to say, why is that the Gulf of Mexico when we have 93% of the frontage? And, it fronts 93% in the United States. I said, I think I'm going to change it to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. And I did. And I give a lot of credit to Google, because once I filed the papers, I did it. And Google Map, once Google Map changed, did it, it was a done deal. But we had lawsuits, we won everything. And it's now the Gulf of America, which I'm very honored by.
But do you expect super
I must
tankers?
tell you, I was thinking about calling it the Gulf of Trump, and I decided not to do it. I think maybe it was a wise. I think that one maybe wouldn't have worked out. I'm not so sure. You'll have to tell me. But I was thinking about it's going to be called the Gulf of Trump, and then I said, that's not going to play too well.
Yeah, that felt coherent. That didn't feel like the deranged ramblings of a mad person whatsoever. That felt, as one person says, that's so predictable. That felt like it. I don't know who that was for. And I'm also embarrassed for him that no one told him that the name was changed again to the Gulf of Luigi. That's kind of embarrassing in and of itself. So remember, it's not the Gulf of America, it's the Gulf of Luigi. I believe there was a vote making that official there. But he doesn't even address the issue. That audio clip that I played for you right there is 1 minute and 23 seconds long. He talked for 1 minute and 23 seconds on national airwaves about a cost of oil and gas crisis that is impacting millions of Americans everywhere, quite frankly, in ways that we have not even felt the impact of yet. And that was the answer that he decided to give. By the way, in a much shorter clip, we also have this back and forth that I think really drives the point home. Don't worry, this one's only 13 seconds.
Do you believe the price of oil and gas will be lower before the midterm elections?
I hope so. I mean, I think so. It could be or the same, or maybe a little bit higher, but it should be around the same.
It could be lower, it could be the same, or it could be a little bit higher. Yes, Trump, those are the three options that are possible. We were looking for some kind of direction that you might think that it's going. And here's the problem. Here's what he is facing that he won't say out loud, but I'm more than happy to say out loud to you guys today. The reason he had the answer to a question like that is because we just started the blockade 41 minutes ago as of the recording of this episode. It's only going to get worse. Like if they fixed everything today, if J.D. Vance weren't a failure of a vice president, and he went over there and the peace talks went accordingly, we still would be experiencing some stupid gas prices this summer because it's going to take some time for things to right the ship. And instead, we're seeing an 8% increase before the show even started in the cost of a barrel of oil. No idea where it sits today, but even as of last week, we are at about 50% more expensive per barrel of oil than we were when the conflict started. It's not a particularly complex issue to have to dive into here. And by the way, until further notice, J.D. Vance is the failure vice president, because if Kamala Harris was a failure because of her work as the border czar, then J.D. Vance has been sent a number of different ways to a number of different committees, and he has failed at everything that he is trying to do. He went to visit the Pope. The Pope died. He went to engage in peace talks with Iran. Those completely collapsed, and now we're doing a blockade. And he went to campaign with Viktor Orban of Hungary, and they lost in a bloodbath election, almost got a supermajority of the opposition party. He's a failure. I think we should refer to him as the all-American reject going forward. But that's just me, of course. No offense to anybody who's cool and wears eyeliner, but if you're a jerk and wear eyeliner, then it's kind of an easy thing to jump into here. But that's just me, of course. So you see the way that he is talking about these things. You see the blockade happening now. And it seems abundantly clear to me that this is going to get worse before it gets better. And I will say it feels less likely for boots on the ground, but more likely for an economic crisis that's going to be strangling all of us metaphorically, of course. A struggle that is only exacerbating a cost of living crisis that existed during the Biden years, that Democrats weren't willing to talk about, or more than happy to talk about now in vague ways, but at least they're talking about it now. Some people might say that's what we were advocating for when the Democrats blew it, but that's just me, of course. Jacqueline says, been thinking about this for a while now. I feel like Trump might be using opioids, watching him carry himself like an animation. I would like to see a meme of, yeah, okay. I feel that. And she went on to say, this is addicting, Ben. Maybe I need to be restricted. I feel that. No, it's a good show. I put a lot of time into the show. I appreciate you finding it, though, Jacqueline, and everybody else through all the different means here. It's a frustrating reality that we have to deal with. And corporations are throwing their lot in with Donald Trump right now. Did you guys see what Apple Maps did? Did you guys see the Apple Maps situation where they took southern Lebanon, a region of Lebanon that Israel has already claimed? We talked about it 2 weeks ago. They have already colonized a larger percentage of Lebanon during this conflict than Russia did Ukraine, and yet we're willing to fight a 4-year war over what Russia's doing, and our American media barely even sees any interest in addressing it. And then, moreover, in southern Lebanon, the parts that Israel is deeming a buffer zone, but they fully intend to colonize, Apple removed the names of all the towns and villages. And I went on Google Maps and zoomed in. You can see full villages, like buildings, infrastructure, like clearly people are living there. It's not like it's all blank territory, and everything else is still labeled, but they removed the labels there as this is happening. And again, to the liberals listening to me that are like, Ben, this is why you should have advocated for Kamala Harris. This is why you messed up. No, this goes to show you that you guys have had your own fear of Donald Trump weaponized against you so that you would be willing to vote for somebody that was okay with what Israel was doing in the name of being afraid of Donald Trump's threat to democracy. If what Democrats actually meant were in any way real, they would have pulled out all the stops to stop him. And instead, we are just watching this trend in a further worse direction than it was under Sleepy Joe. That's just me, of course. Anybody else wants to chime in, 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. I'm going to skim through some of the comments that I have here through the 57 different sources that I try to read throughout the program now, and see any last comments as we put a bow on it. And I have some final thoughts about what's going on here. Hopefully, much like everything else in this administration, it's short-lived and we can pretend that there was some kind of path forward that we could follow. I'm not holding my breath this time, though, guys. I feel like this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Whether that's in terms of loss of life, or more likely, if you're listening to me, how it's going to impact you in the immediate future is your cost of living is about to get even more intolerable than it already was. But at least the GOP is approaching a bill that will require schools to not call people by the gender in which they identify. So, like, not all bad, am I right? We'll be back outside the box, WHBY. And we're back outside the box. Ben Cominos, WHBY. YouTube, TikTok, all the things. You guys know the drill at this point. I'll tell you guys what, I have been inundated with comments, and I love how into this so many of you guys are getting, which I absolutely love. And as I feel like I have to put this disclaimer, because back when it was just the WHBY text line, I was very good at keeping up with all the messages. Now I've got 3 screens that I have to rotate between one. I got my phone set up here for the live, plus all the text. I'm doing my best to keep everybody involved with the show while still keeping it on the rails. It's a work in progress, but I promise you we'll iron this puppy out before it's all said and done. I can tell you that much. All right. So with that, I do want to put a bow on the conversation here. Brian saying, so when are we going to get the enriched uranium? When are we going to accomplish the goals stated in going to war? Why? And you know what's interesting? And I don't have the source in front of me because I wasn't able to corroborate it. So I'm saying this with a grain of salt. Please go look it up on your own time. But apparently Jared Kushner was okay with a peace deal that allowed for unlimited uranium as long as it wasn't enriched. But then the Trump administration came forward and said, no, we're not okay with that. You have to get rid of your uranium. So never mind the fact that it's objectively just nobody knows what way is up in this administration. I don't know what to tell you about the uranium, Brian, because you get a different story every day. And that kind of ties into, and it's probably how we'll wrap this show up today. It ties into how I highlighted, I think it was last week, what the different types of propaganda look like. Like, if we woke up tomorrow and the sky were purple, Fox News comes on the air and says it's another bright, beautiful blue sky in America today, and just acts like the purple sky never happened. Whereas CNN or MSNBC would be like, oh, and for the 5th year in a row, it's another day of purple skies. And you're sitting there and you're like, wait a minute, the sky wasn't purple yesterday. What are they talking about? They'll be like, no, it was what? Do you want Trump to win? The sky was purple. And that's the 2 ways that the propaganda works here. Joe Biden's State Department during the conflict between Israel and Palestine would get up every day and lie to the American public. I watched those State Department meetings quite often in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, and it was some of the best journalism taking place was people trying to hold these people's feet to the fire as, in my opinion, they were misrepresenting the conflict in Palestine. Then you flash forward to this administration, and every single day they just tell you something that is wildly different than whatever they told you the day before. And they just act like that's normal. No, that's 5D chess. That's 5D chess. You're not as smart as Donnie, therefore you just don't understand the games that he's playing. He needs to be unpredictable, so that's why he keeps saying something different every day. Can't stress enough, 45 days ago, nobody gave a single crap about war with Iran, and the fact that some of you are trying to defend it shows exactly how ensnared in this cult that you might actually be right now, which is a very frustrating reality for somebody that kind of builds a show talking about the duopoly, talking about the failures of a 2-party system that hasn't been built to address our needs. But what can I do? You're going to react the way that you're going to react to what's going on overseas. I can just provide the basic common sense to try and address it here. But so I say all of that to say we officially are in the first day of the next step of what is happening in the conflict in the Middle East. Where are we headed from here? Only time will tell, but it doesn't seem like we have our best and brightest trying to address matters right now. I do appreciate one texter saying, Ben, for you and your show and the sponsors of the show, during an unhinged presidency, you're like pennies from heaven. And I appreciate that. It's what this show's built on, is reaching across aisles and actually trying to find a way to reach out to people that actually care about a cost of living crisis, that actually care about making things better, and then acknowledging that that's the case. It's very frustrating to me that it seems like what's bogging us down right now is that there is a slew of MAGA voters that understand that the economy is broken for them, but they just can't shut up about Mexicans and trans people, and they will actually vote to cut off their nose to spite their face in the name of making life less tolerable for trans people and Mexicans. And until we can find a way to get them to stop caring about that and actually vote for their own self-interest, it's going to be a work in progress. That's not to say Democrats are the self-interest, by the way. That's to say that what the Republican Party objectively represents is horse crap and is unacceptable to most people, even people that voted for it, which is nice to hear. With that, we have to call it a Monday program, but that just means we still have 4 more to do before we can call it a week. Download the WHBY app if you haven't already. Search WHBY in Google Play or the App Store. It's free, easy to use, support a local radio station. Of course, the show will be on Political Voices Network, the YouTube channel from 1 to 3 with some bells and whistles. But I also have my own YouTube channel, Ben Cominos. Follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It's all there, all the same name, just Dominoes with a C. Put a lot of work in there, and I'm going to start uploading videos that aren't just this show. More on that coming, of course, as I continue developing this process here. It's a lot. And with that, we have to get out. Haley's up next, and we'll be back on the show tomorrow, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY.